Most women have been faking it in one specific position for years, and they don't even realize there's a scientific reason why it never works. Let me explain. I'm Lauren Bennett, and I spend my time digging through medical research so you don't have to. Today I'm breaking down what the science actually says about which positions help women reach climax, which ones almost never get her there, and the one position that surprised me and every woman I've talked to about this. Stick around for that last one, because it completely changed how I think about intimacy. If this kind of evidence-based, no-nonsense approach to sexual health is your thing, hit subscribe. Over 80% of you watching right now aren't subscribed, and I don't want you to miss what's coming next. Now, before we get into positions, I need to address something important. There's a massive gap between how often men and women reach climax during sex, and most couples don't even talk about it. A landmark study published in Archives of Sexual Behavior analyzed over 52,000 adults across the United States. The researchers, led by David Frederick at Chapman University, found that 95% of heterosexual men reported usually or always reaching orgasm during sex. For heterosexual women, that number dropped to 65%. That's a 30% gap. And here's what makes that number even more striking. Lesbian women in the same study reported reaching orgasm 86% of the time. So it's not that women's bodies are incapable. It's that something about the way most heterosexual couples are having sex isn't working for her. And a huge part of that comes down to one thing: whether or not she's getting clitoral stimulation during the act. A nationally representative survey of over 1,055 American women, published in the Journal of Sex and Marital Therapy by researchers at the Kinsey Institute, found that only about 18% of women said penetration alone was enough for orgasm. Meanwhile, roughly 37% said clitoral stimulation was necessary, and another 36% said their orgasms were significantly better when clitoral stimulation was part of the experience. So when we talk about positions, we're really talking about one question. Which positions create consistent clitoral contact during penetration? And that's exactly what the research answers. Let's start with the position that the data says gives women the most control and the highest likelihood of reaching climax. It's woman on top, leaning forward. Not sitting straight up, not leaning back. Leaning forward toward him. One of the largest studies ever conducted on sexual positions and orgasm was published in Sexual Medicine in 2020 by Krejčová and colleagues out of Charles University in the Czech Republic. They surveyed over 21,000 heterosexual adults, roughly 11,000 men and nearly 10,000 women, and asked them about 13 different sexual positions. They tracked how often each position was used, how pleasurable it was rated, and most importantly, how consistently it led to female orgasm. The results were clear. Face-to-face with the woman on top was positively associated with orgasm consistency. When she's on top and leaning forward, she controls the angle, the depth, and the rhythm. But the real reason this works isn't just control. It's physics. When she leans forward, her clitoris makes direct contact with his lower abdomen and pubic bone. Every time she rocks her hips, she's creating that dual stimulation, penetration plus clitoral friction, that the research keeps pointing to as the key. A separate biomechanical study published in the journal Sexologies in 2022 by researchers at New Age Medical in New York actually measured clitoral blood flow before and after sex in 5 different positions. They used Doppler ultrasound to track what was happening physiologically. In the woman on top position, clitoral blood flow increased significantly. And increased blood flow means increased sensitivity, which means stronger sensations and a higher chance of reaching climax. So what do you actually do with this information? If you're watching this with your partner, or if you're planning to bring this up later, here's what matters. When she's on top, she shouldn't feel like she needs to perform or bounce. That's what adult entertainment teaches us, and it's the opposite of what the research shows works. The motion that leads to orgasm is a grinding, rocking motion. Hips forward and back, maintaining pressure against his body. And for the man in this position, you're not just lying there. You can guide her hips, pull her into you, touch her body. One thing that I always tell people is that connection matters in this position just as much as mechanics. You're face to face. You can see each other's expressions. There's emotional intimacy happening at the same time as physical stimulation, and research consistently shows that emotional connection amplifies physical pleasure for women. I actually made a whole video about what the research says about foreplay and arousal. If you want to understand the full picture of female pleasure, make sure you check that one out after this. Now let's talk about the second position that the research supports, and this one has a specific technique behind it that most people have never heard of. It's modified missionary, but with two critical adjustments. First, a pillow goes underneath her hips. This tilts her pelvis upward, changing the angle of penetration and creating much better alignment between his pubic bone and her clitoral area. That same sexology study I mentioned found that the missionary position with a pillow under the woman's pelvis produced the greatest increase in clitoral blood flow out of all 5 positions they tested. It outperformed standard missionary, woman on top, sitting face to face, and rear entry. But the second adjustment is even more important, and it's called the Coital Alignment Technique, or CAT. This was originally developed in the late 1980s and has been studied in multiple controlled trials since then. A review published in the Journal of Sex and Marital Therapy by researcher A.P. Pierce looked at the accumulated evidence and found that CAT provides, and I'm paraphrasing the research here, consistent and effective stimulation for female orgasm during intercourse. So what is it? Instead of the typical in and out thrusting motion, the man shifts his body slightly upward so that the base of his shaft and his pubic bone are pressed directly against her clitoris. Then, instead of thrusting, you rock together. It's a grinding, pressure-based motion where both partners are moving in rhythm. She pushes up, he presses down. The original study by Eichel and colleagues found that women using this technique reported significantly higher rates of orgasm during intercourse compared to a control group using standard missionary. We're talking about the experimental group reporting orgasm rates around 82% compared to about 33% in the control group. Now, I want to be transparent. These were small studies. The sample sizes were limited, and some replication attempts had mixed results. So I'd classify this as moderate evidence, not definitive proof. But the biomechanical logic is solid. You're maintaining constant clitoral contact during penetration, which is exactly what the larger studies say women need. The practical takeaway? When you're in missionary, put a pillow under her hips, shift up slightly so your bodies are aligned, and switch from thrusting to grinding. Slow, rhythmic, pressure-based movement. Maintain that contact. The speed and depth don't matter nearly as much as consistent pressure against her clitoral area. If this feels awkward at first, that's completely normal. The research on the coital alignment technique actually notes that it takes practice. This isn't something that works perfectly the first time, but once you find the rhythm together, the difference can be significant. Now, I need to talk about something that both the research and every woman I've discussed this with completely agree on. Variety matters. These 2 positions create consistent results. But if you only ever use 2 positions, intimacy becomes predictable, and predictability kills desire over time. The excitement of being moved into different positions, the spontaneity, the physical confidence it takes to change things up, that matters. That's what keeps things alive long term. So use these 2 positions strategically. They're your foundation when you want to help her finish. But mix in other positions throughout for energy, passion, and connection. And that brings me to the position that genuinely surprised me, and that I think will surprise you too. According to the Czech study of over 21,000 people, the kneeling rear entry position, what most people call doggy style, was negatively associated with female orgasm consistency. Women who used this position more frequently actually reported lower rates of orgasm overall. And the biomechanical study confirmed it. Rear entry was the only position they tested where clitoral blood flow did not increase after intercourse. The researchers noted that this position produces the least amount of direct clitoral contact. The science makes sense. She's facing away from him, so there's no face-to-face emotional connection, which we know amplifies pleasure. And her clitoris isn't making contact with anything unless someone reaches around manually. Without that dual stimulation, the chances of climax drop significantly. But here's what I think is the most important insight from all of this, and it's something I feel strongly about. Just because a position doesn't lead to orgasm doesn't mean it's not valuable. When I talked to friends about this, every single one of them agreed. This position provides something different. It feels intense. It feels raw. There's a psychological and emotional dimension to it that's completely separate from whether it leads to climax. And this is where I think a lot of people get the conversation about sexual positions wrong. They treat it like there's a scoreboard. Like every position needs to result in an orgasm or it's a failure. But that misses the point entirely. Sex is an experience, not a single moment. Some positions build tension. Some create emotional closeness. Some are about passion and energy. And some are designed to help her finish. The couples who seem to have the most fulfilling intimate lives, based on the research I've reviewed, are the ones who understand what each position offers and use them intentionally. Frederick's study found that women who reported higher orgasm frequency were also more likely to report trying new positions and having greater sexual variety. It's not about picking one position and sticking with it. It's about understanding the full picture and moving through it together. So here's the bottom line. If you want to help her reach climax more consistently, the research points to two positions. Woman on top, leaning forward, where she controls the angle and gets consistent clitoral contact. And modified missionary with a pillow under her hips, using a grinding motion instead of thrusting to maintain pressure on her clitoris. Both create what the studies call dual stimulation, clitoral contact plus penetration, and both allow for the face-to-face emotional connection that amplifies pleasure. Rear entry is the least likely to lead to orgasm, but it serves a different purpose entirely. Don't avoid it. Just understand what it's designed for. And above all, communicate with your partner. The research is clear that women who feel comfortable expressing what they need are significantly more likely to experience consistent pleasure. No study, no technique, no position can replace open, honest conversation between two people. If you want to understand more about the anatomy behind all of this and why clitoral stimulation matters so much, I made a video that breaks all of that down. Check that one out next. And remember, your health is worth paying attention to.